Now in Grampian North tonight with John Duncanson and Norman Macleod.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to North Tonight. The top stories so far. The Skye Toll Bridge gets the go-ahead and islanders may take legal action. Crimes using firearms soar in alarming new figures. We have a reaction from the people of Skye about the bridge decision. We meet the Birdman of Shetland and the music makers from Russia. Well, that's all after the news, read now by Norman Macleod.
Islanders on Skye may take legal action following the government's decision to give the go-ahead for a toll bridge to the island. Following the outcome of a public inquiry, Scottish Secretary Ian Lang today gave final approval for the £25 million project, but rejected calls for regular government subsidies to bring toll charges down. Labour described the findings as contemptible. Angry islanders may take their fight to the Court of Session.
The £25 million privately funded Skye Bridge will be paid for by tolls lasting up to 27 years and 10 times higher than any other bridge in Britain. The reporter who conducted a week-long public inquiry into the project concludes a toll-funded structure is the only realistic way to build a crossing sooner rather than later. But she recommends an end of tolls date should be announced within a year of the bridge opening and has called for regular injections of public cash to bring charges down. Both recommendations have been rejected as contrary to the government's private roads policy. From the outset, there's been a furious backlash on Skye against a toll-funded bridge. Labour described the report findings as a contemptible apology for democratic participation.
What market is there when you hand over the monopoly of access and egress to an island to a private profit-making company? Skye has been stitched up for reasons that have got nothing to do with improving life for islanders or improving communications for the island.
People in Highland Region didn't listen to the petition that we presented that the West Highland Free Press organised. They didn't listen to the local councillors who opposed the toll regime, and now the Scottish Office have not listened to the public inquiry either. That's why I think justice would be done if the people of Skye and Lochhalsh were given a referendum in this matter.
On the box girder design, the reporter recommends changes proposed by environmental pressure groups. Miller Construction, who are already working on the project at the former Howard Doris oil yard at Kishorn, angrily refute claims of a third-rate design, but say they will make changes.
We have consulted with people and we have adopted a number of changes, all of which we believe will satisfy their comments and which we believe will improve the appearance.
But tinkering with the design is unlikely to calm the troubled water still surrounding the project. Islanders, furious at the high toll regime, are tonight threatening to take their fight to the Court of Session.
Crimes involving firearms have jumped by nearly 30%, according to alarming figures revealed by the Scottish Office. Home Affairs Minister Lord Fraser is to hold a summit meeting with Scotland's chief constables to see if the government can do more to help.
Armed robberies in Scotland, such as the recent hole-in-the-roof raid at an Asda supermarket near Aberdeen, rose by a massive 79% last year, by far the biggest single increase in the Scottish Office Bulletin on crimes involving firearms. Overall, 1,887 cases were recorded. That's up 27% on the figure for 1990, which was also up 27% on 89. There was an 11% increase in crimes involving air guns, the most commonly used weapon, but cases involving other types of firearms, including shotguns, increased by 66%. Scots Home Affairs Minister Lord Fraser says he's appalled at the increase. He says all those concerned with law enforcement are at one in sending a clear message to criminals who insist on carrying guns that it will not be tolerated. He's called a summit meeting of Scotland's police chiefs to examine whether the government could do more. The chief constables say they'll welcome the opportunity to discuss the problem.
Steelmaking in Scotland has ended with the completion of the last production shift at the giant Ravenscraig plant in Motherwell. The last slab of steel came off the plate mill at 10:30 this morning. The complex closes its doors at the end of the week. Claims that Ravenscraig could have been saved by orders from the North Sea oil industry have been dismissed as unrealistic by experts.
There was no ceremony at the Ravenscraig complex as steelmaking in Scotland came to an end. The Motherwell workforce have been resigned for months to the closure after years of speculation. They now face the daunting task of finding new jobs in a town dominated by one industry for the past 35 years.
A lot of young men in there. They've got to be put in the scrap heap because this is a lot of people. This is all their life. So their life's been British steel.
Makes me feel terrible because I'm 61 years of age and I've no chance of getting a job. And I'm going out with buttons.
Opposition parties have condemned the shutdown, accusing British Steel of callous disregard for its Scottish workforce. The SNP's repeated its claim that the North Sea oil industry was a huge potential customer on the plant's doorstep. But analysts insist Ravenscraig would have had to supply 1 million tonnes of steel plate annually, and the market was not there.
For the years 1989 and 1990, it looked as though annual demand was around about the 250,000 metric tonnes level. At the moment, 1992 and 1993, we seem to be in the peak years, and even with the most optimistic estimates, it's still around about 400,000 metric tonnes.
Former British Steel chairman Sir Ian McGregor's claim the plant should have been closed 10 years ago has been dismissed by the then Scots Secretary, credited with winning its reprieve.
British Steel would have literally been short of the product, the stripped product, in several years in the late 80s. And I therefore make no apology if I had some influence on keeping it open, because it was actually needed by British Steel.
Now work must begin at Ravenscraig to clean up the debris of decades of steelmaking. It's estimated that will cost a staggering £200 million.
Sequestration orders have been imposed on 7 poll tax non-payers at Aberdeen Sheriff Court. Civil actions were brought by Grampian Regional Council because they had made no payment towards the community charge since its inception in 1989. Today's sequestrations or bankruptcies were part of a third batch of cases pursued by the council. Several hundred more are being processed. There's been a full-scale gas emergency on a North Sea oil platform. Around 200 workers were sent to muster stations on BP's Magnus platform, 140 miles northeast of Shetland. The leak was traced to a screw fitting on a valve in the riser system and dealt with immediately. On the first anniversary of one of Scotland's most mysterious murder cases, detectives in Fife are vowing to continue the hunt for the killer of former Black Watch soldier Sandy Drummond.
Less than 200 yards from his cottage home at Boar Hills, Sandy Drummond's body was found on this farm track a year ago today. He'd been strangled. Today his mother read the verse of remembrance she'd chosen to place in the press, upset it didn't appear because of an administrative error. She hopes its words will hit home with someone, somewhere. The last sighting of Sandy was captured on a Building Society video in St Andrews on the day he died. Uncharacteristically, he'd been withdrawing large sums of money. Strangely, he'd quit his job at Garbridge Paper Mill a few days before. After a year, Mrs Drummond is frustrated and, despite her Christianity, bitter.
I'm worried that the thing I feel towards these people who committed this, and to those, also those who are shielding, is hatred. Pure, utter hatred. It's no less than that. And I'm not supposed to feel that, but I do. And the quicker they're caught, the better.
The police have had many lines of inquiry. They still want to trace 2 men who jumped into a nearby field shortly before Sandy was found. Despite a major inquiry and nationwide appeals, the police have been unable to find a killer or a motive. They've hit a dead end, but they say the inquiry is far from over.
There's no way that that we'll give up on this inquiry. We have a very clear picture of events. We know where Sandy was that day, various other things, various sightings which have been much publicised in the press and the media, and we'll continue to try and fill in the missing pieces to the jigsaw.
Sandy Drummond rests in peace in a church graveyard near his mother's home. But Effie Drummond says she will never find peace until her son's killer or killers have been brought to justice.
Radical proposals for the public ownership of the island of Eigg have been approved by North councillors in the first land management scheme of its kind in Scotland. The island is now up for sale with an expected price tag of around £2 million. Today, Highland Region agreed to coordinate a buyout by a consortium of public and conservation agencies to safeguard the future of the 50 residents. The closing date for offers is the 1st of July. Supporters say the agreement is a historic breakthrough for the Highlands and Islands.
As far as the overall pattern of land ownership within the Highlands is concerned, I firmly believe that this is the best and greatest step that has been taken by this Highland Regional Council or any other body in the last 200 years. I think we could see a complete change in the pattern of land ownership.
The government has asked Scottish Natural Heritage to seek a management agreement with the American billionaire owner of a Deeside estate. Scottish Heritage Minister Sir Hector Munro told MPs today he was anxious to safeguard Mar Lodge's natural beauty, adjoining the Queen's estate at Balmoral. He promised to keep in close touch with the owner if potential buyers of the lodge itself put forward positive proposals.
We are very anxious through Scotland's Natural Heritage to have a management agreement so as to maintain and safeguard this very fine natural heritage, and we will be in close touch with the owner if the consortia came into being again and saw a positive way forward.
Grampian's health service is to be put under the microscope in a new initiative by the local NHS watchdog. From next week, regular surveys will be carried out to gauge opinions on the standard of service in the first project of its kind in Scotland. The organisers, Grampian Local Health Council, are convinced patients stand to benefit.
Every survey will have a report prepared and any results will be passed on to Grampian Health Board and the providers of services in Grampian. And we will have some recommendations which we will be putting forward, and we'll be able to campaign from there on to have services improved if necessary.
Scottish Enterprise have warned oil companies face long-term decline unless they develop overseas business links. The prediction came as the development body advised firms to find a toehold in the £3 billion Southeast Asian market.
What Scottish companies need to do is to balance portfolios that they have at the moment, try to move away from the domestic market and into some of the expanding and growing overseas markets. I think now is the ideal time to do it when the domestic market's still providing the resources with which to take some of these initial risks.
Coastguards are monitoring the progress of a replica 12th century longboat, now on its second attempt to retrace a Viking odyssey. The 40-foot Ailech was towed out of Stromness Harbour in Orkney yesterday evening to resume her journey to the Faroe Islands. The 8-man crew had to be rescued last week after the vessel's rudder was damaged in mountainous seas off the Western Isles. Coastguards are keeping in regular contact with the longboat, which is carrying a backup rudder system. Football, and Roy Aitken has signed for Aberdeen in a £100,000 deal that ties him to Pittodrie for the next 3 seasons. The St Mirren defender joins the club as a player and co-assistant manager, ending weeks of speculation about his future.
To a stunned press corps, Aberdeen unveiled their latest, most surprising signing. Aberdeen was possibly the only team Roy Aitken hadn't been linked with since it was revealed he'd be leaving St Mirren. As a Celtic player from his youth, Aitken was a winner. He collected all the major honours in the Scottish game with the Parkhead club and captained his country through the World Cup in Italy. It's hoped the 33-year-old will bring similar leadership qualities to Pittodrie, both on the park as a player and off it as co-assistant manager.
I feel as if I proved last year in the Premier League that I've got a lot to offer on the playing side. That'll be the manager's discretion, of course. And I'd like to think I've been brought up with good habits. I've been brought up to be a winner, as has Willie. And I would like to think that putting those two factors together, we can hopefully make Aberdeen back to be winners again as well.
I'm hoping that Roy can bring that passion. I know that he'll bring that passion. I know that we both think along the same lines. As I say, he's got undoubted qualities as a coach. And all of that put together, I'm sure that Roy Aitken will be a positive addition to the staff at Pittodrie.
Aitken will work solely with the Dons first team. He'll get down to coaching business next week when the squad return for pre-season training.
And tomorrow's forecast in brief. Rain at times in the west, but it should be drier in the east. Our young artist tonight is Daniel. The rest of tonight's programme now from John.
Thanks, Norman. Well, there's still part 2 to come, and in that, the long-running Skye Bridge controversy. Residents react to the inquiry report. Welcome back. The Scots Secretary's approval for the £25 million bridge to Skye, paid for by high tolls, is today causing a political outcry on the island. With the results of the public inquiry just published, locals are predicting toll levels 10 times higher than anywhere else in Britain. Proposals to stall the construction in the Court of Session are now under consideration.
On Skye today, the sense of grievance and betrayal is no less acute because the inquiry findings were expected. The majority of islanders had opposed a toll bridge on every ground: economic, social, aesthetic and moral. In the offices of the West Highland Free Press today, the Scottish Office notice inviting objections is set for publication. Inevitably, it seems, the Scots Secretary will have a Court of Session action on his hands. During the inquiry, Kathleen McRae from Lower Breckish voiced local opposition.
Well, I think people are becoming more and more angry as they realise what has been going on, and that really there's been a lot of deception on the whole issue of the bridge. We were very badly let down by the Highland Regional Council in the first place, that they gave way to Scottish Office pressure on the issue of tolls, and it's becoming increasingly obvious that the cost of building the bridge will probably rise considerably, and so will the toll levels.
What then do you think will be the effect on the island and the people?
I think it will have a very bad effect economically. I think it may affect the tourist trade drastically too, because a lot of tourists like to come over the sea to Skye by ferry, but apart from that they find the higher costs of petrol a disadvantage, and if they find that they have to pay a very high toll for an extremely short crossing, it may discourage them from coming over to Skye by car.
Anti-toll campaigners say Highland Regional Council was the last line of defence in a war of Scottish Office financial blackmail. They're bitter that line collapsed and say the bridge will be known as Macpherson's Folly after the regional convener. Duncan Macpherson argues that political realities dictated the decision.
That was a political decision taken by the full council, who thought that a bridge to Skye would only come by this route, certainly not by the Conservative government, who told us it would be 20 years before we get a bridge to Skye. And can I say that we sought out the views of the opposition, the Labour Party, and they couldn't give us any guarantee of a toll-free bridge to Skye either. So that was a decision we took. Now, the more people use this bridge, the quicker it will be paid off. Now, if we care to subsidise the bridge, that's a decision that the council will have to take. But at this stage, no decision has been taken in that respect. But can I say that I was in Skye on Saturday. It cost me $4.75 to get across there and $4.75 to get back. Now, the sooner we get rid of that, the better.
I think we've got to subsidise. There's no two ways about that. The Scottish officers, I believe, gave us a bribe at the time of the bridge that they would trunk the road from Uig to Kylakin. That will save Highland Region, I don't know, £700,000, £800,000. That money could be used to offset the cost to the regular user of the Skye ferry. The regional council here were going to bypass Broadford. That's no longer on the cards. That must be saving £2-3 million. Again, that money could be used to offset the cost of the toll to the local people. And the Scottish office, who are very good at handing out money when it really suits them. I mean, they've got to come in and say, well, the economic advantages that we talk about, they'll only be accrued to us if there is a subsidy. And I think the Scottish office really should come up and say, okay, we'll give you, £1 million a year to offset the cost of the local people. And then it would be an advantage. Then it really would be an advantage.
Objectors now have 6 weeks to lodge comments with the Scottish office. In any upcoming legal confrontation, they have unlikely but apparently legitimate allies in the otters of Loch Alsh. Otters are protected under EEC environmental and British law, and arguments that their habitat will be destroyed by the bridge construction may yet prove an effective stalling mechanism. But to what ultimate end is today far from clear.
Isabel Fraser reporting there. The former Scottish Secretary, George Younger, has told North East businessmen they must look to new opportunities in the emerging democracies of Eastern Europe. Now the chairman of the Royal Bank of Scotland, Mr Younger, assured a meeting of Aberdeen Chamber of Commerce that the former communist bloc countries would soon be crying out for Western goods and services. And he told Andrew Anderson now was the time to seize a share of the new marketplace.
I think it's very important because Scotland's economy is now very widely spread. We've got so many different industries and very high technology industries here. And we always look southwards, and that's fine because the British market is always going to be our most important market. But we don't have to go south only. And traditionally, over centuries, Scotland traded through the Baltic to all those Baltic ports and those Baltic countries, and now they're open again, and we really must look at that and try and rekindle those trade links.
But given the economic situation in those former communist bloc countries, is it possible to do business with them?
What we've really got to look to, and it's not yet, what we've got to look to now is to make the contacts now, because in due course there are 350 million people out there in the Eastern Europe. They are devoid of every sort of thing that you and I regard as normal for our lives, every sort of facility and every sort of consumer goods haven't got, but they're very highly educated. They're going to want that stuff quickly, and I think we in Scotland should try and provide it.
Do you think the unstable political situation is putting off Scots businesses from exploring the opportunities in the East?
I think it's a slight factor at the moment, but the main factor is one that could be easily put right. The main factor is that they haven't changed their laws yet, so that there are laws of property and laws of ownership and laws which make it sure that if you do something for someone, you get paid. Now, until those normal commercial Western laws are brought in, and they're going to be, then it's very dicey to do business there, and I hope that'll be done quickly.
Is there a risk that our European neighbours will steal a march on us here?
There's always a risk of that. We can be just as good as them, with no reason to feel we're second best to the French or the Germans. Scots are very good at this, particularly going overseas and seeking opportunities. Let's get at it. I mean, it really is typical Scots thing to do.
Shetland's most famous naturalist, Bobby Tulloch, has found the time in a hectic schedule to bring out a new guide to the island's breeding birds. The book will be an invaluable mine of information for visitors, both old and new, to Shetland's world-renowned seabird colonies.
Over the years, hundreds of visitors to Shetland have been introduced to the natural beauty of the islands thanks to Bobby Tulloch. He's studied and photographed wildlife since he was a boy, and not just in his native land. This roving naturalist and writer has travelled extensively to remote locations across the world, including the Falklands and the Mediterranean islands. It's some years since the last guide to Shetland birds was published, and Bobby decided the time was right for a new edition. His latest book, illustrated throughout with his own photographs, gives the local dialect names for species found around the islands, as well as the Icelandic, Faroese and Norwegian names, a reminder of Shetland's Nordic history.
The first guide to Shetland birds we did was really amounted to a list of the birds that had been seen in Shetland, with illustrations in black and white of some. It seemed better to restrict it to the breeding birds and to treat them in a bit more detail, because I have found over the years that a lot of people have only a passing interest, and it's these people who would like to help along a little bit by giving a bit more information on details such as the birds' calls, how to identify them by plumage, and where to look for them and so on.
Shetland seabird colonies are famous throughout the world, and cliffs like these attract bird watchers from the four corners of the globe. Bobby's new book will not only help identify the many species that inhabit the islands, but gives invaluable advice to travellers on how to get about Shetland.
I've already written 2 books. This is my 3rd, or if you count the first guide to Shetland birds, perhaps the 4th. Well, I like to write when I think I have something to write about. I hope it's not the last one, but I wouldn't look on as a new career. I've already coming to the end of one career, and I'm involved in 1 or 2 others as well. In Shetland, we do tend to get the odd day, which is not when the sun's not shining and the weather isn't suitable for doing things out of doors. And with breaks between guiding tours to various places, I found time to sit at it this past winter.
Was talking to Andrew Anderson there. A Russian orchestra makes its British debut in the Highlands tonight after a day of rehearsals at Radbury School for Children with Special Needs in the Black Isle. The Kolpina Young People's Orchestra from near St. Petersburg will perform at Fortrose before going on to the annual Highland Traditional Music Festival in Dingwall at the weekend. Peter Macaulay reports.
The links between Radbury and Russia grow ever stronger. Just last month, the principal of Radbury became the first ever non-Russian to be given the country's highest award for his services to education. David Dean is a consultant to the Ministry of Education in Moscow, and he well remembers how he first came across the Kolpina Orchestra.
Well, as part of my work in Russia last October, I'd spent a day in a children's prison just outside St. Petersburg and was feeling fairly dejected at the end of that experience, which wasn't nice at all, because part of my work is to work with the Russians to see how we can change conditions for children who are in trouble in their country. But that evening, my hosts took me into the town hall at Kolpina, and there, waiting for us, was this magnificent young people's orchestra, and it changed my spirits for the rest of the day.
The orchestra travelled all the way across Europe by bus for its first ever visit to Britain. Members are aged between 9 and 29. For them, it's a whole new world following the disintegration of the old Soviet Union.
Russia is changing rapidly, and it's different ways. The most important thing is that we have opened, that we now have a possibility to see the world, to know other people. We have freedoms, all sorts of freedoms, and this is the main thing. Of course, we are facing tremendous difficulties, economical difficulties, financial problems, shortages of all sorts. But, well, we hope to overcome.
How do you think Russian music will be received at a festival of traditional Highland music?
I think that our music will be much in tune with the character of the festival. We hope to do our best, and we hope deep in our hearts that the Scottish people will enjoy it.
The pupils of Radbury looked on in admiration as the orchestra rehearsed in the stables. For them also, it's part of a great new learning process.
Music and singing are a way of life at Radbury, and therefore when our children knew they were coming, they got quite excited. And what's been happening today is that Radbury children and adults have been playing for the Russians, and the Russians have been playing to the children.
And to what extent do you expect to continue to forge those links between yourselves here at Radbury and Russia?
We've already had the Leningrad Special School visiting here, and some Radbury children were in Leningrad before it became St. Petersburg again just 2 years ago, and now we're beginning to plan the next visit by Radbury children to one of the special schools in Russia.
Very nice. Now here's Norman at the news.
Islanders on Skye may take legal action following the government's decision to go ahead with a toll bridge for the island. Scots Secretary Ian Lang gave final approval for the £25 million project, but rejected calls to bring tolls down. John.
Nice to know. Well, that's it. We'll see you tomorrow night, but for the moment, good night. Thank you there.
Grampian television weather, sponsored by Legal & General.
The satellite picture taken earlier this afternoon shows the back edge of a band of rain-bearing cloud edging very slowly southeastwards across the Western Isles and towards the mainland. During the evening and the first half of the night, it will continue to creep southeastwards before becoming slow-moving over the highlands later. This will allow most eastern areas to escape dry. Tomorrow then will start with patchy and chiefly light rain hovering over the highlands. The best of the day's sunshine will be found in Shetland, although there may be a few brighter sunny intervals in the east as well. During the afternoon, more widespread rain will push into the Hebrides and Western Highlands and will gradually move northeastwards. A few spots of rain may filter through to the east, but most areas to the east of the Highlands will escape dry. And there you are. That's the way the weather looks this evening.
Perth Leisure Pool, one of Scotland's foremost leisure attractions, adding quality to life. One visit will show you why. Perth Leisure Pool, where summer never ends.
A top model, a star like Rebecca, with so many different faces of beauty. Behind them all, one face. And behind that face, New Luxe Beauty Facial Wash, washing away the clouds of tiredness. A moment that feeds our needs of dreams and peace. New Luxe Beauty Facial Wash, all the beauty's in you.
From Whirlpool comes the Aqualine washing machine. It saves time, water and energy. Aqualine from Whirlpool brings quality to life.
Announcing the Crombie summer sale with cashmere knitwear from £45 and lamb's wool from £20 at Crombie Mill Shop and Museum, Woodside, Aberdeen. Open 7 days a week.